Hey everyone, Kate Bora and Fiona Pearman joining you for this week's Facebook Live, where we're going to start to dig into the theme for this year's International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March. The theme is Count Her In, Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress, talking all about equal opportunity to earn, learn and lead. And I think, Fee, it's useful to start the conversation around what economic empowerment means.
Yeah, it's a big phrase, and I think there's lots of factors here. And when we unpack it and we look at what economic empowerment is all about, the central piece here is really understanding and actualizing women's rights and gender equality in all facets of life. It's things such as women's ability to be able to participate fully and equally in markets, but particularly employment markets. It's having access and control over resources, financial resources and other resources in their world. And it's access to decent work, access to well-paying, meaningful, decent work alongside others in society.
Yeah, I think when we think about why this matters, again, useful just to break down. And look, this is a very big topic. It's a complex topic. We're not experts in all of it, right? We work specifically with women in leadership. And so there's some threads that we're really going to pick up and dig into, particularly workforce participation and gender pay. But when we think about why it's important, it's critical to realizing women's rights and gender equality. I think when I step back and think about economically, productivity is a huge piece. And when we think about productivity, I think about labour market utilisation. So here we're talking about labour hours or available resources for employment, and that ties directly into workforce participation. Workforce participation has a direct impact on gender pay. So that category is really critical. And we know, and Phil, I'll get you to talk a little bit more about this, but I was quite shocked when I saw this stat, that a woman over her lifetime, over her career, will earn $1 million less than a man. Now, when you think about the gender pay gap, its cumulative impact, of course, that makes sense. We never really look at it, though, over a whole lifetime.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is some really good and robust research has been done over the past few years, and really exciting to see that some of the white papers coming out of the federal government being looked at are really starting to quantify the impact that's going on here. And look, I think, this is quite a shocking statistic that if we have, a woman and a man starting work at 25 and working over their lifetime, women will end up with, that $1 million less. But if she chooses, or if they end up having children, the woman will actually be $2 million worth less well off over her lifetime. So we've already got a compounding system here. We've already got a whole lot of inequity in the system and some problematic issues. But men, when they become fathers, that doesn't impact their financial well-being, but it has a huge and significant and detrimental impact on women's financial well-being. And I think this is such a big thing. We talk about, the kind of there's this huge growing cohort of women in their 50s who are not financially secure, and a lot of this, obviously, is it's a cumulative effect of years and years of doing what they thought was the right thing, supporting, following gender norms, participating, thinking that raising children was the most important thing they could do. And yet, what that's meant for them as they get older and hit retirement age is they don't have equal access to nearly the same resources or the same financial situation as many of their male counterparts.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get a link in the comments to that report because it's a really interesting read. I think the other part of productivity is innovation. The business case is done time and time again around the value of diverse workforces, the value of diverse conversations, and the link that has through to innovation. I think as we think about the future of work, as we think about the future of industry in this country, innovation is going to be critical. Agility is going to be critical to, the overall productivity and economic productivity of our country as well. So some important, not limited to those two, but some important whys. I think the final piece, just to put context around this conversation, is what are the influences at play? And I think we've been having a conversation around life stages and how that interplays with career stages and decision points. And I think the first one that's really interesting to think about is education, vocation and employment pathways. So that choice early on around, what I want to study or what industry I choose to go into has a significant impact on the gender pay. If we go into caring industries, typically lower paid, teaching industries, typically lower paid, go into finance, engineering, typically higher paid as well. And so that's an important factor and influence at play.
Yeah, I think understanding that these decisions and the conditioning and the societal expectations around what are, the things women will do with their lives and what men will do with their lives starts really early. Like we start talking about this when kids are in primary school. There is some work being done in high school, but it's still not resulting in people taking up university places proportionately. So we know we've still got quite a big job to do in that regard. I think, we know this one, family and carer status is incredibly important and it has a huge influence here. I think, again, one of the stats that is really shocking is, very often if women are highly educated and they have lots to contribute, they'll still be the one who opts out, who takes a back seat, who lets their career potentially slide or goes to part-time because they believe, or between them as a couple, they've decided that that's the best course. But there are real costs to that. And sometimes we know, talking to women, that's not always a very conscious choice. People haven't thought through the long-term ramifications and haven't really considered that there are lots of options and potentially sharing arrangements and different things that could be done to start to loosen some of those expectations and default assumptions around that.
I think the third influence in play is always financial literacy. I think there's some interesting work being done into this space around, our ability to be able to have agency over and control over resources to participate in economic decision making means we do need to have some financial, I'm going to say digital literacy as well. Again, some good work being done in this space, in obviously an ever increasing digital world. And so, there's definitely work. I even think around, my own network. Sometimes I'm shocked, right? With some, or the level of the lack of financial literacy that some women have. And actually, with our professional women's community, one of the biggest and highest attended webinars every year was always around financial year end, when we talk about things like super, insurance, all of, these important things, because there was a lack of confidence, I guess, in being able to have the information to be able to make informed decisions in that space.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Women were definitely curious. They wanted to know more. They were hungry for information, but they didn't necessarily think that they were the one to drive the conversation, that they had agency in this area. And I think that's a really important piece as we start to unpack what's going on here. I think the other thing that we speak to a lot and we know is really playing out is this is a factor in terms of the personal development and growth of women in the system. The thing we're all navigating this complex. There's so complex system. There's so many different influences. There's so many different pieces going on. There's a whole lot of societal norms. There's expectations. There's what our parents did. There's loyalties. There's all sorts of pieces that are consciously and unconsciously influencing our choices, even the view of what choices we actually have. And as we start to think about that, as women raise their consciousness, as we become more self-aware, as we do the work to expand what we see as our options available to us, we start to do things differently. And we've absolutely seen this. We see this time and time again in the programs we run. We see women speaking up. We see them challenging some of the default assumptions. We see them having different conversations with partners and leaders. We see them expanding their world, thinking that they have more rights in terms of what they want to do for their career and for their, economic empowerment.
Yeah, I think lots to cover, right? Oh, we could talk forever, but we're going to leave it there. We are going to continue over the next couple of weeks to dig into specifically workforce participation and the choice points there throughout life stages and career cycles, and the gender pay gap as well. So watch this space. If you want to find out more about our work, feel free to head over to our website, coreconfidence.com.au. And if you want to go deeper with your relationship with Core Confidence, contact us and we can share more about the work we do, both individually with women, but also in organisations to really support, to empower and accelerate the progression of their female talent.